traditional conservative, that seems to be what they're going against. And that seems to be how they're forming, and against for gun reform, for transgender rights. And I think that is the failings or the issues of the previous generation is what, sort of defines their initial, coming out, their creation.
I think that's a pretty convincing argument. I mean, you can trace that through the entire 20th century, right? Depression leads to baby boomers concerned with economic growth. And then the kind of conservative, segregationist attitude of the baby boomers leads to the civil rights movement and kind of anti-establishment feeling in Gen X, and so on and so forth.
The negativity of Gen X leads to the positivity of the millennials, and then the failings of the millennials to address a lot of the social issues in the country. Of
course, the one thing, and I'm gonna cut you off here, Joe, because I know what his criticism is gonna be. I think is that that's super subjective, and isn't really based on kind of broader measurable trends so much.
That's a good argument. That is not the argument that I was going to say.
I think, Ryan, your point rings true intuitively because it's literary. It is a good story about generations and how they lead into one another. And I want it to be true.
I think it is.
But I don't know if we can, I mean, for instance, you're talking about, political engagement and how Gen Z is increasingly wants to set its agenda as overturning the, inlaid problems of the previous generation. Well, I want that.
Well, we're right on the cusp. We don't really count.
But at the same time,
we're just like that group in between 1985 and 1990. That's very, and when I say they grow up with a very negative opinion, I mean that's been shown basically because they grew up under the Cold War. Like they grew up under constant fear of nuclear war, even though that's kind of exaggerated nowadays. Like there was an overall general feeling of negativity around the world. Like the Soviet Union, this dominating thing in the East, was going to come and destroy everything. Like there's a general difference between outlooks on life between the millennials and the Generation X.
I think you are a very good historian, but as a political scientist, I find myself deeply skeptical of this kind of narrativity.
That's fair.
Yeah, let's not forget that Gen X's or the Gen Zs are around and they may be reacting to what you can call the failure of the millennials, but they're also reacting to the other 3 or 3.5 generations, which are also still alive at this point. That's what's missing from your model.
I would address that too, because I feel like in terms of what we're seeing here is we're seeing a flare-up, I think, is certainly in this plurality generation, if you will. I know that they're saying that this won't go away, but like the shooting was not that long ago. I think it's a little premature to maybe say that it's just not going away.
It has sustained in terms of initial, it has internet staying power, and it's still being talked about at far greater extents than anything else.
I do have to say,
also you're seeing the NRA losing deals, they're losing negotiations with other organizations, and their membership, I think, fell a little bit, based off of initial reports.
Well, I have to say, in Ryan's defense, I don't know about long-term staying power, because obviously it's too early to objectively say it's had more staying power. But the fact that it's too early to politicize this narrative has completely failed, I think.
Oh yeah, and I don't want to say that I don't think they're... anytime that somebody says, "Oh, it's too early to get political about something," I'm like, "Well, no, everything's political." Like,
right.
there's never a point.
What's interesting is that this time around, this time around, the majority of people agree with you.
The Pulse shooting in Orlando, people were finished talking about it by this point. They weren't talking about gun control. They were talking about, he was possibly a terrorist. When it came to Sandy Hook, they were still talking about the tragedy, but they weren't talking about gun reform. They
turned it to mental health. And it was...
This is about gun control, and I don't think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to... The Republican, the conservative, echo chambers or whatever you want to call them, the conservative think tanks are going to be able to do that shit.
I think we need to introduce other factors here, because you talk about the weakness of the NRA, but there are other things going on, It's not just that the Gen Z is better at messaging, though that may be the case. It's also the fact that we've got an active investigation which confirms Russian money, at least to some extent, has been funneled through the NRA. So, like, they've got other problems right now, and you have to take that into account.
I
Which
also
might
want
be
to
encouraging, the people who normally come out against this to lie low.
Gun control has been.
There are other things going on.
Gun control has been trending on Twitter since the Parkland shooting, and as someone who's been on Twitter for more than 5 years, I have never seen gun control or any conversations about it last this long.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and here's where I'm going to try to go in. It's the people who are talking about it, this plurality generation. They don't vote. They can't vote yet.
Well, no,
Yeah.
but that's not what Ryan's argument
So-
is about. Ryan's argument isn't about whether this particular event is going to lead to widespread gun reform.
Well, no, I realize that, and
Their job is to influence their parents.
Yeah, and I realize that, but here's the thing: if we're using this technological argument, saying that they're using this, the problem is that the people who would be saying stuff against it aren't saying it on such a platform. They're saying it in other mechanical ways. They're the older generation.
Also, if we include people, if we include people like you and me as part of this plurality, and maybe you're not. I mean, you all have your own separate opinions on it, but I tend to agree with what they are saying. Like, they have convinced me through their own arguments and their activism that I'm going to probably vote for gun reform and gun control now, where beforehand I probably wouldn't have, because I was leaning more towards my parents, but now I'm leaning more towards their arguments, and maybe I'm too easily swayed, as Joe's looking at me like, "Oh, you feckless centrist." However,
we're not getting into another gun control debate.
But the thing is that no, can all of them vote? No, my sister can't vote. She won't be old enough to vote in the next presidential election, but a lot of them will be able to. They'll be able to vote in the next presidential election. They'll be able to vote for these midterms, and they are sure as hell are extremely loud on social media, and there's a lot of them, and politicians see that and have to deal with that, whether or not. They're not going to be able to click on someone's Twitter bio and be like, "Oh, you're not. I don't have to vote for you, or I don't have to worry about you. You can't vote for me yet." If that thing has 700,000 retweets and like 500,000 favorites,
And I'm not saying
more
I'm
than
not
just the people my sister's
and
age.
I agree. I absolutely agree. But the problem is that we read about it, we hear about it on the news and things of that nature. Again, I'm hesitant to call such an early judgment. I think it is. It's showing.
I agree. I think I should say I agree with you on that. Like, yes, it's very early. We haven't actually seen any legislative change in the thing. I think you will.
And I think it's possible, but I'm hesitant of everybody to like throw the book at all these like older institutions, even such as like the NRA. The NRA, while it is like the boogeyman that everybody loves to target, is not the biggest player really in the gun debate on the conservative side. It's one of those things where it's like we're targeting the boogeyman still. And I don't know, and this is going to come into my thing where all this, where we use Twitter or YouTube or something as the medium of distribution, I think, based upon just, again, anecdotal experience, I'm about to be very bad here, has led to, yes, an interesting understanding of politics, the better like distribution of the concept, but it's superficial.
I mean, I tend to agree with you, but 2 or 3 years ago, I would have considered the NRA untouchable. Like a completely, almost indestructible organization here in this country, based off of how effectively they're the ones who make sure these stories, go away. It gets turned to mental health. It gets turned to something else. And by the way, I'm not saying that there needs to be a change in mental health, but I think that gun reform is also very critical. And the NRA, I think for the first time that I've seen, and granted, I haven't been alive for all that long, has almost, and again, I think you might be right when you say it's too early, is almost met its match for will it be able to just drown this out? Will it be able to, until something crazy happens with the president or something like that, I think that they're going to have to actually stand up and deal with it publicly, and they have a lot of stuff coming. I can't use a more expletive word. They have a lot of stuff coming in regards to 2018 midterms, because there are a lot of people talking about this issue that would not be talking about it. And so the NRA is a better target, and I put that in air quotes, for this movement to go after, because it gets more people talking and interested, and then they can be informed and learn how it works through the NFA.
Yeah, but my concern here is, assuming these students, I assume they want to make change. I think that's a pretty fair assumption. Who exactly are they targeting with these campaign ads online? Yes, they're getting it talked about in the news. Yes, I agree with that, and that's perhaps the more significant thing. But using social media as a way to try to promote what are more traditionally left views is foolish. Because you're only because, as we've said, that social media tends to have a more left bias, so you're not exactly talking to people who can easily be swayed. These marches, and doing these things, much better way to do it, and I think that's the more impressive part of this whole campaign, not how long has it been trending on Twitter.
Well, I think it's two-pronged. I think that number one, the marches, they're using social media to inform everyone about the marches, to get people, up and to get people out. But number two, and I guess secondary to that, and using the same principle, I think that what they're targeting people your age, my age, and just above to go out
we're the
and
same
actually.
Age, Ryan.
Are you? Well,
yeah, we're both 20.
Oh, I thought you were 19. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. They're targeting people our age group to go out and vote, because we don't ever vote. Young people don't vote in this country. I think, Joe, you're the statistics man. What is the percentage of youth in America that votes? Isn't it something like 25% of the
youth turnout does tend to be very low. I don't have the statistics in front of me.
I think that the whole point of everything, and maybe they don't even know it, but what it's going to do is that they're going to convince us to go out and vote. And we all vote anyway, but there are a lot of people who don't.
Well, that is the question, whether or not this can last more than 3 weeks and actually turn into electoral success for presumably the Democrats.
When are the midterms, Joe?
November of this year.
November, the first Tuesday in November of this year.
You think it'll make it?
And that's the
Not
question.
this event.
I don't think so. I think that's part of the problem with social media, is that it is designed
50 minutes of fame.
Yeah, exactly. It is designed for short attention spans. And the people who they're targeting through social media have short attention spans. The question is can we get that to translate long term into electoral success? I mean, that remains to be seen.
William is right. If this is going to have an effect, it's not going to be this November. It's going to be 2022 or 2024 when this is a big thing. It's about shaping opinions, not driving instant political success.
You're right. I think that you're going to see. I think that you'll see it in 2018. I don't think you'll see it in 2022. I mean, I think you will see it in 2022, but I think you'll see it in 2018 as well.
So I think this is we're focusing in a lot on kind of. We're taking a magnifying glass to it and saying, well, if we have this one specific issue, gun control, and this is the specific conversation that's going on about it. But the topic of this episode is generations, and the shift is not, I think, going to be so much that we have these specific events surrounding specific issues, but that the way political activism and the way political thought is transmitted is going to change fundamentally. Our parents, Gen X, I'm hoping, maybe baby boomers, who knows, they regard their political views as a private affair. If they are a private citizen, they don't feel the need to broadcast their political views, right? I mean, I know my parents, even though they're very politically outspoken, they just don't talk about who they voted for. It's a personal thing for them. And the shift that I think we're seeing, and it's not just Gen Z, it's millennials as well. It's a gradient. I love that word, gradient. The shift that we're seeing is that politics is becoming personal. And that's, my personal opinion, a good thing.
All right, I said I would never let this happen again, but Jacob, you get the last word on that one.
Hot diggity dog.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been another episode of Talking TWAMPs. I hope that you have all enjoyed it, and tune in next time to hear our discussion on hopefully something a bit more positive. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Yeah.